Coin's heritage today, we're turning our attention to one of the most familiar yet overlooked coins in America, the good old 1994 Lincoln penny. Yep, just 1 cent, but it's packed with history, hidden details, and some surprising facts you might not know that we all use pennies almost every day, or we used to anyway. But have you ever actually stopped to take a good look at one? Especially one from 1994. Let's break it down: the design, its value, how many were made, and what was going on in the world when it was minted. This tiny coin might not look like much, but it tells a story that stretches back more than a century. Let's start with the design. On the front of a 1994 penny, you'll find the familiar face of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. This design was first introduced all the way back in 1909 to commemorate Lincoln's 100th birthday. It was created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, and it became the very first U.S. coin to feature an actual historical person. Lincoln faces right, and above him are the words, "In God We Trust." To the left, you'll see the word liberty, and to the right, the date, 1994. Just beneath the date, you might see a tiny letter, either D for Denver or no mint mark, which actually means it was minted in Philadelphia. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the Lincoln Memorial, a design that was used from 1959 until 2008. Look closely if you've got good eyes or a magnifying glass, and you'll actually see a tiny statue of Lincoln inside the memorial. It's a really neat detail that a lot of people miss. The words United States of America curve across the top, and 1 cent is boldly struck at the bottom. Just above that, the phrase E pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. Now, this penny might seem basic, but in 1994, this little copper-colored coin had already gone through a few changes. Before 1982, pennies were made mostly of copper, 95% copper, to be exact. But starting in mid-1982, the U.S. Mint switched to a cheaper composition, mostly zinc, with only a thin layer of copper plating. So your 1994 penny? It's made of 97.5% zinc and 2.5% copper, weighing about 2.5 grams. That means while it still looks coppery, it's mostly zinc underneath. So, how many 1994 pennies were made? A lot. Like a lot. In Philadelphia, the ones without a mint mark, the U.S. Mint produced over 6.5 billion coins. And in Denver, with the D mint mark, they struck another 7.1 billion, that's right, over 13.6 billion pennies from 1994 alone. That makes it one of the most common modern dates for Lincoln cents, so they're not rare by any stretch. But even with that high mintage, collectors still care about condition. So let's talk about value. In regular, circulated condition, the kind you'd find in a change jar, a 1994 penny is worth exactly 1 cent. That's no surprise, but in uncirculated condition, the story changes. If your coin has never been used, meaning no scratches, shiny luster, clean details, it could be worth around 10 to 50 cents depending on the grade. And if you've got a mint state 67 or 68 coin, especially one certified by grading services like PeaceGS or NGC, it could go $4.10 to $50 or more to the right collector. There are also some error coins out there for 1994. Examples include off-center strikes, double die errors, or bubbled plating due to the zinc core reacting with moisture. If you spot one of these, it could be worth anywhere from a few bucks to several $100s, depending on how dramatic the error is. Always a good idea to keep a magnifying glass handy when you go through pocket change. You never know what you'll find. And now let's step back a bit and talk about what life was like in 1994 that the U.S. was going through some big cultural shifts. Bill Clinton was president. Amazon was founded that year, though it only sold books at first. And the internet was starting to make its way into people's homes with dial-up modems and Netscape browsers. People were watching Forrest Gump in theaters, listening to Boyz II Men, Nirvana, and TLC on the radio. And TV was ruled by shows like Friends, The X-Files, and Seinfeld. It was also a year of major world events. Nelson Mandela became South Africa's first black president. The North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, had just gone into effect. And in sports, the FIFA World Cup was held in the U.S. for the first time. Think about it. When you hold a 1994 penny, you're holding a tiny time capsule from a world that was on the brink of the digital age. A world before smartphones, before streaming, before social media. Now let's throw in a couple fun facts. Did you know the Lincoln cent is the longest running design in U.S. coinage history? From 1909 until today, Lincoln has been front and center. That's over 115 years on the penny. And the Lincoln Memorial reverse, like we see on the 1994 penny, ran from 1959 to 2008, nearly 50 years. In 2009, to celebrate Lincoln's 200th birthday, the Mint replaced it with a set of 4 special reverse designs, and in 2010, the Union Shield design became the new standard. Another interesting tidbit: while the penny still costs 1 cent to spend, it actually costs more than 2 cents to make. That's right, every 1994 penny that circulated technically lost the government money. And that's why there's been a long-running debate about whether or not we should eliminate the penny altogether. Should you keep your 1994 penny? If it's an average circulated condition, it's safe to spend. But if you find one in mint state, or with an unusual error, it's definitely worth holding on to, or even getting graded if it's exceptional. And for collectors, it's a solid part of a full Lincoln cent date, SET. But to the end of the day, the 1994 Lincoln cent may be common, but it's still a coin with a legacy. It carries over 100 years of design history. It witnessed the rise of the internet era, and it's one of billions that passed through people's hands buying bubble gum, riding buses, or getting tossed into a wishing fountain. Next time you see a penny on the ground, don't ignore it. Pick it up. Look at the date. Because every coin has a story, even the ones you barely notice. In 1984, a penny didn't seem like much. It still doesn't. Just 1 cent. It could barely buy anything even back then. But hold on to one long enough, and it might just tell you a story about Abraham Lincoln, about American history, and about how even the smallest coin can become a powerful symbol of a nation's past and present. The 1984 Lincoln cent is part of a coin series that has been in continuous production since 1909, making it one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. It's small, round, made mostly of zinc, and weighs only 2.5 grams. But despite its size, it's packed with meaning. And the 1984 issue? That one's especially interesting to collectors and historians alike. Let's start with the basics. The obverse of the coin, the front side, features the familiar bust of President Abraham Lincoln, facing right. This portrait was originally designed by Victor David Brenner to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Lincoln's birth in 1909. It's one of the most iconic images in U.S. coinage history, serious, dignified, and instantly recognizable. Above Lincoln's head is the word liberty. To his right, the date, 1984. And just behind his neck, depending on where the coin was minted, you'll find a small D or S mint mark, or no mint mark at all, which means it was struck in Philadelphia. The motto, "In God We Trust," arcs above Lincoln, anchoring the coin with the values that the United States has long held. The reverse side, minted from 1959 until 2008, features the Lincoln Memorial, designed by Frank Gasparo. It replaced the earlier wheat ears, reverse in honor of Lincoln's 150th birthday. Look closely, and you'll even see a tiny representation of Lincoln seated in the center of the memorial, making it the only U.S. coin to feature the same person on both sides. Across the top of the reverse are the words United States of America. Just below that is the Latin motto E pluribus unum, which means out of many one. And at the bottom, the denomination, asterisk, 1 cent. So what makes the 1984 Lincoln cent stand out from the rest of the millions, even billions, of pennies minted every year? For one, 1984 was well into the zinc penny era. In 1982, the U.S. Mint had transitioned from the traditional 95% copper composition to a copper-plated zinc planchet due to rising copper prices. This means the 1984 penny is mostly zinc with a thin copper coating, something that makes it lighter, cheaper to produce, and more prone to certain types of wear and damage. In fact, if you scratch or damage a zinc penny, it can reveal the silver-gray color beneath the copper plating. This is especially important to remember if you're trying to identify authentic 1984 errors or counterfeits. Now, here's where things get really interesting. One of the most well-known and sought-after varieties of the 1984 Lincoln cent is the 1984 doubled ear penny. That's right, the doubled ear. This isn't a joke or an urban myth. Some 1984 pennies, due to a rare die error, show a clear doubling on Lincoln's earlobe. It's a type of double die error, which occurs during the minting process when the die that stamps the image onto the coin receives a misaligned impression. As a result, Lincoln's earlobe appears to have a distinct double outline, something visible even without magnification if the coin is in good condition. This variety has fascinated collectors for decades. Depending on the coin's condition, a 1984 doubled ear Lincoln cent can fetch $50 to over $200, especially if it's an uncirculated or mint state condition. Even circulated examples, if the doubling is visible, can bring in $10 to $30, which is a massive return on a 1-cent coin. That little flaw, that doubling, turned an ordinary pocket change penny into a minor treasure. It's a reminder that even machines can make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes become something people hunt for, talk about, and preserve. Aside from the famous doubled ear variety, most 1984 Lincoln cents are worth only face value in circulated condition. That's because the mintage numbers were huge. Over 8 billion 1984 cents were produced across all three mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. These coins are everywhere, and unless you find one in pristine, uncirculated condition, it's unlikely to be worth more than a penny. But don't let that fool you into thinking they're not worth paying attention to. Coins like the 1984 penny are everyday artifacts. They were used to buy candy, pay for phone calls, or drop into a gumball machine. They've traveled through countless hands, witnessed thousands of moments, and become tiny, quiet time travelers. Pick one up, and you might be holding a coin that's been in circulation for 40 years. That's remarkable, considering how often we toss pennies into jars and forget them. There's something else about 1984 that adds a layer of interest: the cultural context. The year 1984 was filled with tension, innovation, and iconic pop culture moments. The Cold War was still ongoing. Ronald Reagan was in the White House. Apple launched the Macintosh computer. Prince released Purple Rain. And in the world of literature and politics, George Orwell's 1984 loomed as a cautionary tale, though thankfully the real 1984 was far less dystopian. Through it all, the humble penny kept changing hands, carrying with it the image of a president who fought to preserve the Union, and a memorial that honors democracy and sacrifice. Many people overlook pennies, but coin collectors know better. A single cent can hold value far beyond its denomination. It might teach you about minting processes, introduce you to historical figures, or reveal quirks and errors that make it unique. That's especially true with the 1984 cent.so. How do you tell if your 1984 penny is special? Start by checking for that doubled ear. Use a magnifying glass if you have one, and look closely at Lincoln's earlobe. If there's a noticeable second lobe or doubling effect, you may have a valuable variety. Then, check the coin's surface. Look for luster, minimal contact marks, and full detail in the lettering. A high-grade example, even without the doubling, can still be worth more than face value if it's in exceptional condition. That if you're serious about coin collecting, you might consider submitting your 1984 penny to a third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC. They can authenticate the coin, assign it a grade, and encapsulate it for protection, all of which adds credibility and value if you ever plan to sell or trade it. But whether you collect for fun, for investment, or just out of curiosity, the 1984 Lincoln cent is a great example of how even the most common coins can be gateways to learning. It's a reminder to pay attention, to look closely, and to find stories in the smallest things that, the next time you come across a penny, don't be so quick to toss it aside. It might be from 1984. It might have a doubled ear. Or it might just be a link to the past, a tiny copper window into a world where Lincoln's legacy, machine errors, and American resilience all live side by side. At first glance, the 1974 1-cent coin from the United States doesn't look much different from any other modern penny. You see Abraham Lincoln's familiar face staring calmly to the right, his expression reserved and thoughtful, just as it has been since 1909. It's the kind of coin you might pass by without a second thought. But if you know where to look and what to look for, the 1974 penny turns out to be more than just a piece of spare change. It's part of one of the most fascinating chapters in American coin history, involving experimental materials, public outcry, and even a coin so rare it's worth tens of thousands of dollars. Let's start with the basics. The 1974 Lincoln cent features the long-standing obverse design by Victor David Brenner, with Lincoln's profile facing right. His image is flanked by the word Liberty on the left and the date 1974 on the right. Just under the date, on some coins, you'll see a small letter, either a D for the Denver Mint or an S for San Francisco. If there's no mint mark at all, it was made in Philadelphia. Above Lincoln's head is the motto, "In God We Trust," completing the clean and balanced design that has stood the test of time. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the familiar Lincoln Memorial reverse, designed by Frank Gasparo. This reverse had been used since 1959, replacing the original wheat ears design. If you look closely, you can even spot a tiny figure of Lincoln seated inside the memorial, a nice nod to the obverse portrait. Along the top of the reverse, it says, "United States of America," with E pluribus unum just below that. At the bottom, the denomination, 1 cent. Now, in terms of mintage, 1974 was no small year for the penny. The U.S. Mint struck more than 10 billion Lincoln cents across the 3 major facilities. Over 4.2 billion in Philadelphia. Made of aluminum. Yes, aluminum pennies. And they're among the rarest and most mysterious coins in U.S. history. In the early 1970s, the price of copper began to rise sharply. The cost of making a penny was starting to exceed the coin's face value. This caused concern at the U.S. Mint and in Congress. If it cost more than 1 cent to make a 1-cent coin, something had to change. So in 1973, the Mint began testing alternative metals. One of those alternatives was aluminum, cheap, lightweight, and abundant. It seemed like the perfect solution. The Mint went ahead and struck more than 1.5 million 1974 aluminum pennies as test coins. They were distributed to members of Congress and others for evaluation. The idea was to get feedback before making the switch official. But as news of the proposed change spread, concerns also began to rise. For one, aluminum pennies didn't work well with vending machine coin sorting devices, which had been calibrated for the weight and conductivity of copper. Even more pressing was a health concern raised by pediatricians. Since children often swallow coins, doctors feared aluminum would on X-rays, making it difficult to detect a swallowed penny. It might seem like a small issue, but it was enough to halt the plan. Why early 1975, the aluminum penny project was dead. Congress rejected the switch, and the Mint ordered all aluminum test coins to be destroyed. Officially, none of the 1.5 million aluminum cents should exist today, but a few managed to escape destruction. A very small number, likely fewer than 15, are known to exist, and none were ever legally released into circulation. These aluminum cents are illegal to own, technically speaking, because they were never monetized or authorized for public release. Still, examples have turned up in private collections, auctions, and legal disputes. One of the most famous examples was held by a former U.S. Capitol Police officer who received it as a gift from a congressman. The government later requested its return, citing it as stolen property. The legal debate surrounding these coins is as intriguing as the coins themselves. As you might guess, a genuine 1974 aluminum cent, especially from the Denver Mint, is worth an astronomical amount. If one were ever cleared for private sale, it could bring upwards of $200,000 to $500,000, depending on its condition and legal status. Firm 1974, the aluminum penny is known, and it has been a significant controversy. Now, to be clear, if you find a shiny or silvery-looking 1974 penny, it's almost certainly not aluminum. It's more likely a coin that's been plated, altered, or chemically. Real 1974 aluminum cents are extremely light, just over 0.9, less than a third of a normal penny. They also have a distinct, dull, silver. If you think you found one, don't spend it, get it. Back to the copper coins. The ones most counted on to be coin-proof versions of the 1974 penny, which were struck at the San Francisco Mint with a special high-quality finish. These coins have mirror-like surfaces and sharp details, and they were sold directly to collectors in proof sets. A proof 1974 is worth more than face value, typically $1 to on condition. And of course, like many others, the 1974 coins are also scrutinized for errors and varieties. You might find coins with die cracks, off-center strikes, or double dies. While no major, famous double die varieties are associated with 1974, ones occasionally surface. And these can be depending on how strong and noticeable the doubling is. For collectors building a Lincoln Cent album, the 1974 and its Denver and San Francisco counterparts are easy to obtain, but the real thrill comes from understanding what they represent. These aren't just coins. They're part of a larger conversation about economics, materials science, politics, and the limits of practicality in currency. The aluminum cent is a perfect example of how even the lowest denomination can become a lightning rod for debate and a legend in its own right. So, if you're going through a pile of old pennies and you spot a 1974, take a moment. Think about what was going on in the country at the time. The Vietnam War was winding down. Watergate was reaching its climax. Inflation was rising. And in the middle of all that, the U.S. Mint was quietly experimenting with the very future coinage, as light as the beauty of coins. They're not just tools for commerce. They're storytellers. They remember things they pass through generations, quietly witness to the changing world. And sometimes, when you're lucky, they offer up a yet been solved. The 1964 win from the United States, the classic Lincoln Memorial, might seem ordinary at first glance. That most Americans have handled, probably without giving it a second thought. Little cottage story, tying together American history, politics, economics, and even art, all within a single cent. Let's begin with the front of the coin, known as the obverse. It features the iconic profile of Abraham Lincoln, president. His bust faces right, and it's the same portrait created by sculptor Victor David Brenner, first introduced back in 1909 to celebrate Lincoln's birthday. That makes it the longest-running design on any U.S. coin. Above Lincoln's head are the words, "In God We Trust." To the left is liberty, and to the right is the date, 1964. If the coin has a small letter D below the date, it was minted in Denver. If there's no mint mark, it came from the Philadelphia Mint. Now flip the coin over, and you'll see the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a structure we associate with grandeur and remembrance in the heart of Washington, D.C. This design had replaced the Wheat design in 1959, marking the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The words, United States of America, arch across the top, while Urbis Unum, Latin for out of many one, sits just above the memorial. Below it, in bold lettering, is the denomination, 1 cent. If you look fine, actually figure of Lincoln the memorial. Detail. In terms of its physical makeup, the 1964 penny is composed of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin. It weighs about 3.11 and has a diameter of 19 millimeters. Its edge is plain with no reading. At the time, copper was still relatively cheap, and these coins are made in enormous keep up with growing demand. And when we say enormous, in 1964 alone, the Philadelphia Mint produced over 2.6 billion pennies, or mint 3 more, 19-cent U.S. coins ever made in a single year. It was a time of economic expansion, baby boomers, and big change, and the penny was the everyday workhorse of America's growing economy. What's a 1964 penny worth today? In most cases, circulated coins are extremely common. And unless the coin is in truly exceptional, it won't fetch much more than face value. But uncirculated examples, especially those with full red color and no blemishes, can be worth a 1964 penny graded MS. 65 or higher might sell $4.05 to $1.15. And if it's a particularly pristine full red designation from a grading service, the value can rise even higher. For serious collectors, color and condition make a big difference when it comes to Lincoln cents. Then there are the errors and varieties. Some 1964 pennies were struck off center, have die cracks, issues that create minor collectible value. A few rare examples show double die where parts of the design, like the lettering or Lincoln's profile, appeal. These can be worth significantly more depending on severity and visibility. But aside from monetary value, the 1964 Lincoln penny carries symbolic weight. This was the last year before the U.S. Mint would begin phasing out silver from its higher denomination coins. It was also a year of major cultural transformation, the civil rights escalation of the Vietnam War, and the beginning of what many consider a new era in America. Holding a 1964 penny is like holding a tiny piece of that trend. There's something nostalgic about it. These pennies show up in old jars, coffee cans, and dress. People have really mirror or continuity. Penny that they used to buy gum at the corner store or feed into a parking meter decades AG, almost Lincoln cents won't. They offer something more valuable, a connection to a time not so long ago, when even the smallest coins carry a bit of history in your pocket. If you've got one of these pennies, take a closer look. Who knows, in just a cent, it might be a story. Now we're taking a nostalgic trip back to a time of juice fountains, American style, all through the lens of a small piece of history. The 1954 Lincoln wheat cent. That's right, a simple 1-cent coin for 1954. But behind this humble is a rich story that spans war, peace, change, and design legacy. Let's dive into what makes the 1954 penny so, from its look, its metal, its value, and what life was like when it first jingled into someone's pocket. At first glance, a 1954 penny might look just like the ones you find in your change today. But flip it over, and you'll immediately spot the difference, or obverse, of the coin. Features the familiar bust of Abraham by Victor David Brenner. The design was introduced back in 1909 to mark Lincoln's 100th birthday, and it was the very first time a U.S. president ever circulating faces to the right. Head, you'll see the words "In God We Trust." To his left is the word and to here for. Just below the letter, a D, an S for San Francisco, or no, which means it came from. But flip the coin to the back. The real vintage character shines. Instead of the Lincoln Memorial that mocked, the 1954 two stylized wheat ears each side. Name. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Between the wheat stalks, 1 cent. States of America, and just E pluribus unum, Latin for out of many one. This wheat design from 1909 to 19 remains one of the most loved and collected coins in numismatics. Now, itself. Unlike modern pennies, which are mostly zinc with a thin copper, 1954 penny was 1% copper, 5% tin, and zinc. It weighs 3.11 grams and has that rich, deep copper tone that gives older pennies their beautiful age character. Over time, these coins can develop a natural patina, that dark brown or reddish look, but collectors love finding them in red or red-brown uncirculated condition, where the original luster still shines through. Oh, how many of these were made? In total, over 486 million Lincoln cents were struck in 1954 across 3 mints. Philadelphia, no mint mark about 71 million asterisk asterisk. Denver, D mint marked the largest mintage at over 251 million. San Francisco, S mint mark about 96 million. So while not exactly rare in number, Many have been lost to time, corrosion, or simply being tossed away and forgotten. All right, now to the question every collector wants answered. How much is a 1954 penny worth today? If you got one in average, circulated condition, the kind found in a coin jar, it's typically worth about 3 to 10 cents for a penny, but nothing too exciting yet. But if you've got one in uncirculated condition, the value goes up fast. A 19D wheat penny in mint state 65 red condition might fetch $10 to $20. A 1954 S in similar grade could go $4.15 to $30. Version, slightly lower mintage, can reach $25 or more in pristine shape. The most valuable versions are coins graded MS 67 or like PCGS or NGC. These could sell for $200 to $500 plus, depending on demand. There are also some known errors and varieties worth watching. Double die obverse, where the appears doubled. BI errors, a small die break that looks like an I between the B and E in Liberty. Off-center errors, these can make even a common coin worth a collector's premium. Often $50 to several $100, depending on the severity. Don't just toss that old, check it carefully under a magnifier. Now let's take a moment to appreciate the time this coin came from. 1954. It was a post-war nation of optimism. The economy was strong, the suburbs were growing, and was alive and well. Television was entering more homes than ever before, with shows like Father Knows Best, The Lone Ranger, and I Love Lucy ruling the screen. IT was the year Elvis Presley cut his first record. The U.S. Supreme Court issued its landmark ruling in Brown Board of Education, declaring racial segregation in schools unconstitutional. War was heating up, and led to the rise of McCarthyism, with loyalty oaths and blacklists sweeping across Hollywood and government. Gas cost around 22 cents a gallon. It was just 7, and a penny actually meant something. Bubble gum, and even a small toy if you were lucky. People Harry King Cole, giant chrome-covered cars, and watching as science fiction, rock and roll, and civil rights slowly began to shape the future. In that context, the 1954 penny wasn't just a coin, it was a part of everyday life. It sat in the pockets of factory workers, servicemen, teachers, and kids buying baseball cards or comic books. It's wild to think that this tiny copper disc may have traveled through thousands of hands, seen decades of history, and still survives today. Even if it's not made of silver or gold, it has something more valuable: legacy. It's a reminder of who we were and how much things have changed, or in some ways, how much they haven't. So next time you come across a wheat penny, especially one for 1954, don't just drop it in a change jar. Take a closer look. Check the mint mark. Look for sharp details or unusual features. And if it's in good shape, maybe slide it into a coin flip or a small case, because it's more than just a coin. It's a little time traveler. Thanks so much for watching and going on this journey with me through the story of the 1954 wheat penny. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to ring the notification bell. We've got more stories from history hiding in your pocket change coming soon. Have a favorite wheat penny year? Or a coin that brings back memories? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear your stories. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Coins Heritage. Today, we're turning our attention to one of the most familiar yet overlooked coins in America. The good old 1994 Lincoln penny. Yep, just 1 cent, but it's packed with history, hidden details, and some surprising facts you might not know that we all use pennies almost every day,